But verse 7, we see that Moses put the coat on Aaron and tied the sash around his waist, clothed him with the robe, put the ephod on him, and tied the skillfully woven band of the ephod around him, binding it to him with the band. And he placed the breastpiece on him, and in the breastpiece he put the Urim and Thummim. And he set the turban on his head, and on the turban in front he set the golden plate, the holy crown, as the Lord had commanded Moses. Now, this is described in Exodus 28, Exodus 29, again, with the high priestly garments and the garments for the other priests as well. But I just wanted to say a few things about some of these things, especially the Urim and Thummim, because I get questions about this all the time, and it's kind of an interesting topic because it deals with divination and whatnot. But the Urim and Thummim was object here. So the high priest has to wear a linen tunic, and that gets tied with a sash, and then he has to put a robe on top of that, and then the ephod was worn over all that. And the robe that the ephod fits over, according to Exodus 28, was made of purple wool, and it had golden bells attached to it. Between each bell there was a pomegranate. That's Exodus 28, 34, and Exodus 39, 26. That's interesting because Second Temple sources and rabbinic sources about why the bells were there and what purpose they served. There is a possibility here, because you don't actually have an example of this historically, either in the Old Testament or not, but you'll actually read of speculations like when the high priest, especially at the Day of Atonement, when he actually went in and stood before the Ark of the Covenant, he entered the most holy place. Since he's the one wearing the robe that has the bells and is sewn at the bottom, that was so that people could hear that he was moving around and that he was still alive. And you'll read, again, rabbinic sort of speculations about tying a rope around his leg because, again, someone figured out, well, if God kills him, if he does something wrong, if he's impure, and God strikes him down, how do we get him out? And so you tie a rope around the leg, and if the bells stop ringing, then there might be a problem. Okay, there might be trouble, that sort of thing. Again, that never actually, there's no actual instance of that, either in the Old Testament or, again, other ancient sources, but you will read about this kind of speculation, kind of, hey, maybe we should do this, or someone will allude to the fact that it was done, but nothing ever happened. Again, how do you validate that historically? Well, I guess you can't in one sense, but again, just in terms of a practical sort of solution to, a problem that could come up in somebody's mind. Well, because of Nadab and Abihu, like in Leviticus 10, what if this happens to the high priest? How do we get him out? We can't just go in there. And if he's in the Holy of Holies, even the priests, no priest is going to say, yeah, I'll go in and get him, because he could get struck dead too. So again, as a practical consideration, yeah, maybe this is why the bells were there. Maybe they did tie a rope around his ankle or something. Again, you'll see that referenced, you'll see this problem alluded to, but you don't actually have an incident of it. But it's kind of interesting. The ephod itself I find interesting because it's made of wool. Again, if you go back to Exodus, the chapters that describe its constitution, it's made of wool and linen, and it has gold threads woven into the fabric, and so much so that it has a golden appearance. Now, the reason I mention this, the amount of gold, I'm hinting at something here, is that elsewhere in the Old Testament, you will see people like David call for the ephod to be brought to them. You'll see Gideon. Gideon, quote, sets up an ephod in Judges 8, verse 7 in his hometown. He either makes a replica of this, or, it has something to do with divination, with asking God questions for the will of God and that sort of thing. Because in the high priest's ephod, you had again, the Urim and Thummim in this pouch that was on the breastpiece, and that's what the high priest would use, again, to get knowledge from God. So there are other passages that either that specific ephod was used, again, by a high priest or some priest to ask questions of God, or you have somebody like Gideon who might have sort of made his own. And the question is, well, that's just kind of odd. Why are you asking for like a garment to be brought up? And how do you, quote, set up a garment? Well, this has led to some speculation. Some people say, well, maybe they're just using the term ephod for a statue, like Gideon made a statue or an idol or something, because Gideon, by this time in Judges 8, really isn't a good guy. Maybe that's what's going on. Others suggest, well, maybe they made a statue and they clothed it. They put clothes on it so that it would look like the high priest. And then that was brought out, something like that. There's another possibility here. If there was enough gold in this thing, and if it was the actual ephod, or again, an exact replica, there is the possibility that it could have stood on its own. It could have supported its own weight because of the gold in it, and it would have sort of held the fabric firm, and you could move it around and stand it erect. Who knows? I mean, we're not specifically told. It's just that the same term, the ephod, is used in these contexts, especially Gideon. There's the issue with the Levite later in the book of Judges. Whose name is Micah. Again, he's not really the high priest, but yet he has this ephod and he uses it. So you have these situations where they're using something, and something is moved around, something is brought to them and put back that has something to do with the way the actual ephod functioned. Now, the high priest would have been wearing this thing, and again would have had the Urim and Thummim inside of it. So there's some apparent attempt to either use that actual object or to make something like it to use for divination, to get knowledge, from God on the part of other people. So again, it's speculation. We're not specifically told, but those are the possibilities. While we're at it, let's talk a little bit about the Urim and Thummim. That's mentioned in verse 8. And this object, I don't know. Somebody should just make a Twilight Zone episode out of the Urim and Thummim, because there's just all sorts of interesting possibilities here. So we have it in verse 8, Moses places the breastpiece on Aaron, and in the breastpiece, it's the Urim and Thummim. Now, the meaning of Urim and Thummim, even that's not completely clear. It's apparently a stone object. And the question is, there's a number of questions. The first question is, what shape? Flat or fairly flat stone on one side? And that question is raised because in Mesopotamia, there are similar objects used to cast lots. Now, you say, well, why are we talking about casting lots with the Urim and Thummim? Because in passages like 1 Samuel 14, where the Urim and Thummim is brought out, this is the episode where stupid Saul makes this vow about nobody can eat anything until this battle's won. And of course, Jonathan, his son, doesn't hear it. Saul's like, anybody who eats anything is going to be put to death. And so Jonathan's the hero of the battle, but he has some honey out in the battlefield because he was exhausted, and he comes back, and then this is found out. And so Saul is put in the awkward position of having to execute the guy responsible for winning the battle. But while Saul is trying to figure out what's going on here, who's the guilty party, because he hears about this, they bring out the Urim and Thummim, and it's actually said that what's cast are thrown down in the Hebrew text. And so the speculation is that, well, maybe it's flat on one side, and so it would land either one side or the other, because again, you have this casting lot terminology associated with the actual object, the Urim and Thummim. Now, if that's the case, if the Urim and Thummim was like flat, the flat stone, they could be on one side or the other. Then the view is that, well, there must have been something on it that elicited either a yes or a no response, a positive or a negative response. And so some scholars believe that the Urim and Thummim was designed specifically for yes and no questions of God.